Hey yo everybody, how are you all doing today, and welcome to a quick little video on the survey that I did a long time ago. And before I begin, this video is not going to contain the responses to the survey. That's going to come out in a separate video tomorrow. Today I'm going to answer the survey for myself in today's video. So if you're interested in the answers, those will come around tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that. That said, let's get into it. So first question is, what should the general track design take after? And Tricky had some pretty awesome tracks, some of the crazier ones. On Tour had some nice ones too. In Tricky, obviously, Tokyo Megaplex is a standout example of a track that was really crazy and stood out, probably as one of the most memorable tracks. But I still like the design a little bit more in Free. I feel like everything serves a purpose in Free, except for some of those rail lines that just instantly kill you. Don't know what they were thinking with those. Are there any specific tracks I'd like to bring back? I mean, kind of, but not really. There are none that I'm that excited about having back, that I'd want them back regardless of how they'd play with the new game. But if they'd play nicely with the new game, I would really like to have Style Mile back. Style Mile's my favorite track of all time, so I guess I'll say Style Mile to this one. Not really too torn up about it either way, though. What game's character should it have? Now, this might be a little bit of a curveball for some. I actually prefer Tricky's character lineup. Not only were the characters, they had personality in both games, in Tricky and Free, obviously, but they had even more personality, and there was kind of more going on between them in Tricky. You had the whole rival system with the friends and enemies, and they also talked to each other before and after events. And Free also introduced some of the characters that I didn't really get on with that well. So some of the blander characters, stuff like that. So yeah, I'm gonna say Tricky for this one. Next up, the game's general art style. Now, I do really like some of the things in Tricky. I love Tricky's color scheme and how vibrant it is. I also like some of the realistic looking things in 2012. They're nicely made. But for an overall aesthetic, in terms of vibe, I think I would have to go for SSX on this one too. Some of the characters, I'd say the characters probably look the best in Free as well. So I'm going to go Free for this one. Next question is, what menus and UI should it use? Now, I'm obviously quite biased on this, but since I do runs of a lot of SSX games, I'd probably end up doing runs of this new one, so I'd really want the fast resets that only Tricky can offer. In terms of how they look, I think 2012 has the nicest looking menus, and Free is a good balance between speed and looks, but since I'm all about functionality in UI, I'm gonna go Tricky for this one. Next question should come as a surprise to absolutely no one who's seen any of my content or any of my gameplay at all. I prefer how the character handles in terms of movement in Free by a long shot. 2012 is a little more responsive, but I still prefer the control scheme in Free, and classic controls had some major flaws in 2012, so I'm gonna go Free for this one. The next question is, what game's controls should it be most similar to in terms of tricks? So, Tricky has a very simple but intuitive way of doing tricks. Free is like a nice balance between giving you lots of options and being somewhat intuitive. On Tour is the same as Free, but I don't like what they did where they moved your Uber tricks, in that game monster tricks obviously, to the right stick instead of the shoulder buttons. And 2012 is a little more responsive, but I'm not that big of a fan of how the tricks handle in general. So it's going to have to be Free, although Tricky is a close one on this one. OG and Blur, not even in consideration for this one. The progression system is actually a very interesting question. I thought about that for quite a while. I really like how Tricky and OG and Blur handle it, where you just beat events to move on. But in Free you also have lots of options. I would go for Tricky's system if it wasn't for the fact that there's no free run in that game. There are no collectibles, there are no big challenges. You just have the events and that's that. If Tricky had free run aspects, then yes. But I like the options you get from Free, so I'm gonna have to go Free, somewhat reluctantly. Gonna skip going in depth on progression, just move on to soundtrack. So soundtrack, for me it's gonna have to be On Tour. I really love the punk, rock, and hip hop vibe, but I also really like the soundtrack from Free and 2012. Free was very nice for its time. I loved all the rock in Free, and some of the hip hop and electronic there as well. 2012, I'm actually quite fond of electronic music, so I wouldn't actually mind that. And Tricky is definitely the best non-licensed one. So For me, overall, it's going to have to be on tour still, though. Asking myself all the event types I'd like is a pretty tough question because I tend to like options in games, so I'd like a lot of options. But, you see, for every event type that's developer resources that can't be dedicated to something else. So I think a good balance would be to have everything except slopestyle without multipliers and slalom. Slopestyle without multipliers would kind of just be excessive, and slalom's just kind of boring, I think. So, about the online mode, my idea is going to be pretty simple. It's going to be kind of similar to Steep, in the way that you can just drop into another player's world as you please. But you should be able to turn it off, and you should also keep the events from SSX 2012. So you'd have a Steep-esque multiplayer, and you would have the 3-2-1 Go events, and you would also have global events from 2012. Next question, should it have combos? Just going to be a straight up yes from me. It's, while it does kind of make it lame that you can fail at any point during the run and you can lose your entire combo, which might make it impossible to actually win the event, it still adds a very nice element of skill and of risk reward, both of which are things I like, so I'm going to say yes. In terms of what type of combo system it should have, SSX OG and Tricky are a little bit too simple, whereas in 2012 it's way too powerful. So it would have to be SSX Free or On Tour. I would go On Tour if it wasn't for the fact that in On Tour, it's super overpowered if you land a trick on a rail, which I don't want. So I'm going to have to go Free for this one. Should the game have Uber tricks? I'm not going to spoil anything, but as you can expect, this question is a landslide in the actual survey results, and I'm no different. Yes, definitely. Should the game have monster tricks? I actually went back and forth on this for quite a while, because it kind of makes it easy to do all the freestyle stuff, but it's kind of a cool Easter eggs, and it's nice to be able to, if you learn the monster tricks, you can get decent at freestyle, which I quite like. It makes it easy to get introduced into top freestyle, so I'd like to keep them, yeah. But I was close to saying no on this one. Should it have gear? Now, in 2012, I felt gear was gimmicky at best, and I feel even if it was executed a little differently, I still don't feel like gear is the type of thing that has a place in an SSX game. Maybe it can be nice if executed properly, but I'm gonna say no. Wingsuits were a pretty cool addition to 2012. I actually kinda liked them, they were fun to use, but they were really overpowered at times, and even if you made it so they can't actually fly over the track, like the option says, I feel like it would still take away so much of the skill required that I'd just rather not have them. So I'm gonna say no, although I wasn't that far off saying yeah, sure, if you balance it somehow. Should the game autocomplete flips and spins? Yeah, I'm just gonna say straight up yes. It makes it easier to learn and easier to play, makes it less frustrating. There is skill, and it is nice to be able to pull off the perfect pre-wind and get the amount of flips and spins you want, even if they don't autocomplete. But yeah, I want them to autocomplete. That's my started playing with SSX3 effect coming in, no doubt. So thinking about whether there should be a money system or not, I was actually going back and forth on this, because it'd be kind of cool to have it tied to progression, but I noticed this in 3, where you have money tied to progression, you kind of make the player choose between cosmetics and decking their rider out the way they want to, and actual game progression, and I feel like most people are going to go progression, at least at first. So I think, why not just let the player have both? So that means cosmetics. Should it have character creation as an option? Now, I feel like I mentioned earlier how things take away developer resources. I feel like I don't really care if it's hastily made, I just like having the option. I don't feel like it would take that much in terms of developer resources, so I feel like you'd probably be able to fit that in if you want to. So I'm gonna say yeah. Whether it should operate in an open world or not is a pretty simple decision for me. I really like open world games. I love the amount of freedom it gives you, the ability to go anywhere, do anything as you please. It's open world for me, all the way. Next question is, when you get Super Uber or Tricky, should it be infinite? I was actually going back and forth on this for a while, but I eventually decided on, yeah, if you don't bail or reset, it's fine to reward a skilled player with infinite Super Uber until they mess up. I feel like that's fair. it's not that much stronger than just having to get your boost as you go anyway. Question about how the character should improve goes back to what I said earlier about progression and money and all that. I would like to have your character improve through getting stat points by placing well in events, just like in Tricky and OG. However, you would probably make it a little more complex. Instead of having just the 4 stats that you do in those games, probably make a few more and maybe some abilities as well. I feel like that might be cool. Would I like to have shreds? Absolutely. In my ideal game, they would probably replace the big challenges. They wouldn't be for progression, it would just be for money or fun. But I think they would pretty much replace the big challenges. And yeah, they would be really nice to have back. I loved shreds in On Tour. Probably one of the best decisions to include that in On Tour, in my opinion. Very much like them. Should it offer skis? Now, this one's probably kind of controversial. Like I said, if it doesn't take much developer resources, I like having options. Skis might take a lot of developer resources though, because you have to basically design an entire new playstyle. So if it wouldn't take that much, I would like to have the option, but it would probably be one of the first things to fall down my list of priorities if it becomes a hectic schedule. So yes, I'll say yes, but it would likely fall down the list of priorities if needed. Natural hazards. I'd like to have them for atmosphere and a spurt of excitement. In 2012, I mean, it was cool, but actually having them as a real threat that you could die from and your run would be over and stuff like that. No, I just like them to be there as a tool, an immersive tool, allowing you to basically engross yourself deeper in the game. As having it actually very relevant to gameplay, I wasn't that big of a fan of it in 2012. And I don't think I'd be that big of a fan of it, pretty much regardless of how you execute it. So, yeah. Now, rewinding in 2012 was kind of a strange one, because yeah, you could use it, and you could make up the what you lost from it, because when you rewound in races, the other characters would just keep going, and if you did it in freestyle, you would lose your combo, at least temporarily, but you could recover from that. But I still don't like the idea of just having a rewind button. I'd much rather not be able to fall off the track and actually die from it, and just give me my reset button and I'm happy. Story is an interesting one because depending on what the developer, most likely EA, would decide to do, story might take a lot of resources. So once again, it might be one of those things that would fall down the list of priorities fast. But yeah, if it doesn't take that much, yeah, I'd like it. That would be nice. Should there be a DJ? There absolutely should be a DJ. Roselle and Atomica did a lot in terms of making the game more lifelike and easier to immerse yourself in. The helicopter pilots from 2012 weren't bad, but they didn't really give any backstory or any sort of vibe. They were kind of more like co-pilots. And even then, I don't know, maybe this was just me, but I had a hard time hearing them during gameplay anyways, sometimes. They would kind of get drowned out by the game a little bit. Geotags were a great addition to 2012. I actually really liked them. So yeah, I'd love to bring geotags back. Alright, so there you have it. Those are my answers. I'm just quickly going to scroll through it if you want to see it all kind of summarized in a quick, easy to digest manner. So if it's going a bit too fast, you can just pause it. I'm trying to be a little bit slow. This should probably take about 30 seconds. I'm trying to just do one at a time, but sometimes it ends up doing more than I bargained for, but that's okay. So yeah, that's basically the survey. It's been interesting. I know, since I kind of took it in verbal form and didn't actually have to adhere to the survey, I added some more details, some things that most people who took the survey probably weren't able to. But that's a perk of being able to respond in video form, I suppose. Alright, so there you have my entire survey. Now for the little end scene. So yeah, there you go. That's going to be it. I hope you enjoyed the survey. Thanks everyone for taking it. I knew I'd get a fair few answers, but I had no idea over 250 people were going to take the survey in just the first week or two. That absolutely blew my mind. And on that note, this has been quite a while. I don't really have any excuse for not having done this before now. I just didn't really get around to it. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun to do this. If you have any constructive criticism to give me for future survey writing, So this was my first time ever writing a proper survey, and you know, I might do more of this in the future because this was fun. It might become like a yearly thing or whatever. So if you have anything at all to say about the survey, maybe something I should change for the future, be sure to let me know. But yeah, thanks everyone for taking it. I appreciate all of that. And that's going to be it for me. So thank you all so very much for watching. Have an absolutely bang up rest of your day. Take care and goodbye. I really wink a lot, don't I?